Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, have you ever wanted to host your own website? I know. You're crazy to host your own website. Why is that? Why am I crazy to host my own website? You know how I feel about the cloud. I don't trust it. I don't trust companies with my data. I don't trust companies not to sell my data. Not that I have anything to sell and not that I have anything to hide. I just don't want them having it. I want to control my own destiny. Just like I have my own network, I don't trust my network to the cloud. I don't trust my data to it. Companies come and go. They come in and out of business. They get hacked. Plus, I like to tinker and play around with my websites, and that's how I learn. So, if you're so inclined, that's what this video is all about today. It's how to set up your own web hosting server. And it's not for just one domain. I have multiple domains that I own, or I have the rights to. And I want them all on the same server. I don't want to have to go out and rent a server, albeit you can rent servers pretty cheap these days. You know, probably about $10 a month you can get a server for, even lower than that. But I like controlling my own destiny, and I like controlling the back end and seeing how all that works. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how to set up an Ubuntu server, how to install Webmin, Virtualmin, and how to set up basic web hosting, basic web host server, and how I did it. Now, this is not a soup to nuts installation. You need to have some basic knowledge about DNS. You need to know how to go out to Hover or whoever, what other name registrar you use. I prefer Hover, that's just my personal preference. And register a domain name, and you need to know how to point DNS records to the right IP address. You also need to have a public IP address in order to be able to come in. If you don't have a public IP address, you're going to need to know about dynamic DNS. So this is just to show you, again, my videos are not tutorial videos. They're just to show you what the potential is that I can have, that I can use with the equipment that I have, what I can make happen. So this is going to be as a virtual machine on my Dell 2016 domain controller, running Windows Server 2016. So let's quit talking and get started with the install. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is create a virtual machine that is going to host our Ubuntu Webmin-Virtualmin server. And I'm not going to run through the install process of Ubuntu. It's pretty self-explanatory. I'll pick up some key parts of the install that you need to see and be aware of that should hopefully help you follow along. The first thing we want to do is create a virtual machine. So I'm in Hyper-V, which is what I use. I'm on my 2016 domain controller 01. And you can see I've got a plethora of other virtual machines that are up and running. I've already actually created my web server, and we'll come back and use that later, but I want to do one from scratch to show you. So the first thing we want to do is do a new virtual machine. And I'm just going to call this Web 2. It's going to be a Generation 1. I'm only going to give mine 2 gig of RAM. You can give it more if you want to. I need to tell it what subnet I'm on, what LAN connection I'm using. And I'm just going to let it create a 127 gig virtually expanding hard drive. And I'll install the OS later. And then finish. And that's how easy it is to create a virtual machine. No, I'm just kidding. Now we need to change some settings. We need to tell this virtual machine what to boot off of, and we want to boot off the Ubuntu install CD or ISO image that we've downloaded. So I'm going to go to settings, and I have put the ISO file out on the local hard drive of this server. So if I browse to my drive pool and go to my ISO folder, here's my Ubuntu 16.04 .2 server, AMD 64. So I'm going to attach that to the IDE controller, apply it, and tell it OK. So now what I'm going to do is double click, and then I'm going to power on this virtual machine. Okay, we select English as our language. We're going to install an Ubuntu server. We speak English, United States. I'm not going to have it detect the keyboard. I'm just going to tell it it's an English US keyboard. Now, one of the things I don't care for on the Ubuntu install while we're waiting is the fact that I don't have an option here to set up my networking. It automatically does sets it up to use DHCP, but that's okay. If you were to use CentOS, and you can use CentOS with Webmin and Virtualmin, that's another video in itself, but CentOS allows you to go in and edit your network config while you do the install. So as you can see here, it's auto-configuring, getting an IP address from my DHCP server. Alright, now I'm going to call this on the host name Web2. I'm going to continue. And I'm going to set up my user. Yeah, I'm a big Battlestar Galactica fan, so that's why I use Belladama. No, I'm not going to encrypt my home directory. Alright. Now, Ubuntu, yes, Ubuntu is going to go through several steps here. We're going to tell it to create a LVM partition guided using LVM. That's logical volume management. So I'm just going to tell it yes. Now, I'm going pretty quick through here, but you can rewind the video, pause it if you need to get the settings that I got. Now, this part of the install is going to run, and then after that's done, it'll ask us what features we want to install. So I'm going to pause the video here while it's installing, and we will come back when that screen comes up. Alright, so now we've come to the package manager, and now what it's doing is it's asking you if you need to use a proxy server in order to get onto the internet. We don't, so I'm just going to tab down to continue, leave that blank. So apt the program that goes out and gets other software, is retrieving some basic files and setting up our repository, and should hopefully come up here fairly soon. Now what we're doing is a base install, and I'm going to tell it no, don't do automatic updates, because when we run the script for the Webmin Virtualmin install, it's going to change all that anyway. So the only software you want to load is two items: your standard system utilities and OpenSSH server. The reason you want to run or install OpenSSH server is so we can get in via a terminal program later to do the necessary installs for Webmin and Virtualmin. So make sure you've selected standard system utilities and OpenSSH, hit continue, and let this run. And then we'll come back when this is complete. Alright, so now that part of the install is completed. So now it's asking us if we want to install Grub, which is the bootloader to the master boot record, and yes, we do. This is one of the beauties of having a virtual network and a lab setting, to where you can create these kind of virtual machines and experiment with them and learn. And trust me, the more stuff you fill into your head, more data you put into your head, the better it's going to do you in the long run. Okay, so the installation is complete. It's time to boot your new system. Make sure to remove the installation media. I don't ever do that. Windows Hyper-V just seems to handle that itself. So I'm going to tell it continue, and hopefully it will reboot here. Now, it's my understanding that Ubuntu has the Hyper-V integration built into it. So I've just logged in as Adama and with a password that I created. And now I'm going to type ifconfig. And what that's going to tell me is my IP address. And you need to write this down. We're going to be changing that later. But right now it's hard-coded, or it's gotten a DHCP address of 5.50. So we'll write that down for future reference. so now we can, actually we're done with this part of this for now. So I'm going to get that out of my way, and then we're going to load Putty. Putty is a terminal program. It's also a telnet program. It's quite a bit of programs built into one, and of course it's on the desktop that I am not using right now. So let me load Putty, bring it over here so you can see it, and I'm going to go ahead and just manually type in the IP address, and that was 5.50. Now the first time I try to log in with Putty, it's going to give me this security alert about the certificate. You want to tell it yes. Now the next time you log in with Putty, it won't prompt you for that. So I'm going to log in as Adama. Alright, there we go. And it's even telling you to run a command as administrator, user root, use sudo command, man sudo root. Ubuntu has changed how they use the, they don't give the root user or the root access without sudoing into root, if that makes sense. Alright, so now we need to continue on with the next step, which is getting Virtualmin and Webmin installed. So I'm over at the Virtualmin documentation page, and we've done step 1, which is install your grade A supported operating system. They also want you to be sure to configure the system with a fully qualified domain name. It says it'll save you a lot of time and documentation, and I'll try to explain that later best as I can. So what you want to do is run these scripts that are here, the wget script, and then we're going to run the install script, and we're going to let this run, and this is going to take quite a bit of time. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to highlight this string, right click and choose copy. Then I'm going to go back to Putty, and I'm going to paste that and hit the enter key. And what that's going to do is it's going to download the install script for Virtualmin. Now the next thing I need to do is to run that script, that shell script. So I need this command here. So I right click, copy, back into Putty and paste that. And now it's going to prompt me for my password for Adama. So I'll enter that in. Now it's warning you, this was a little disconcerting to me. It tells you it's supported on CentOS 6 and 7, Debian 7, 8, and 9, Ubuntu 14.04 LTS and 16.04 LTS on i386 and AMD 64. Now, that was a little misleading because I'm running Ubuntu 16.04.2, which is not mentioned up there, but any of the versions of 16.04 should work. And it's going to tell you, if your operating system version architecture is not listed, installation will fail. So I'm going to hit the Y key now and hit enter, and I'm just going to enter a fully qualified domain name as web2. I'm going to use my mcs.local. This really doesn't matter because I have a NATed system here. So this will rear its ugly head later, and I'll show you, because there's a couple of ways to handle web hosting DNS, and I picked the easiest way. So I'm just going to put web2.mcs.local, and what it's going to do now is it's going to go out and it's going to do the install of Webmin and Virtualmin. And hopefully, if I've done everything right and we'll come back in a little bit, and all of that will be taken care of, and we should be able to get in and start configuring our server. While this is running, just so it's not only installing Webmin and Virtualmin, but it's installing the complete LAMP stack. LAMP means Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. It also installs Postfix and NJ, or whatever else it needs to run as a web hosting server. So that's why we didn't install LAMP when we did the initial install of Ubuntu. We could have, but it's kind of redundant because it's going to download the LAMP stack and install it. And I prefer to have the one that Virtualmin and Webmin recommend to keep us from having trouble down the road. So I just wanted to inject that while this is still installing. It does indeed install the LAMP stack, as you can see right there. And it installs one specifically made for Virtualmin. So here we go. It looks like we were successful. It says if there were no errors above, Virtualmin should be ready to configure. And it gives us the web address to go to. So I'm going to scroll up here. And it looks like there were no errors. So I think we're good to go. So what we want to do now is bring up a browser and go into the configuration. So what we want to do is we have to, it's going to be a secure site, so we do https :// then the IP address and then a port number 10,000. Now it's going to warn us the security certificate is not valid. That's okay. We're going to go ahead and proceed. And here we use that Adama username and password. Now the first time this comes up, Virtualmin is going to want to run its little configuration routine, and we're not going to do that. Okay, we'll allow it to show notifications. I'm just going to cancel on this installation wizard. We can come back and run that again. The first thing I want to do is get my IP address set in here correctly. I want to hard code it. So I'm just going to use the IP address that they gave us, but I'm just going to take it for me, hard code it. Actually, the IP address I'm going to use, I believe, is 11 because I want to use a static IP. So what I canceled on the Virtualmin configuration. I'm going to come back over here to Webmin. Then we're going to go to networking and down to network configuration. The reason I like this Webmin configuration because it gives you a GUI to do all of this. You can go out if you enjoy going out and editing these configuration files manually. More power to you. I'm a GUI guy. I like to use a GUI. So we go to our network interfaces, and this is where we're gonna select ETH0, and we're going to tell it a static configuration. We're going to enter our IP address here and our net mask. And we're going to save that. And return to network configuration because we need to go out and change our router. So our router should be a gateway. And that should be 192.168.5.254. And we need to save that. Okay, hostname and DNS client. This should all be set up in here already. web2.mcs.local. It's already seen my DNS servers. This is my local DNS for Active Directory, and these are my external DNS servers. Google, of course. And then host addresses. Now, this is what you're going to need to come back in and change after we do a reboot. So we're going to change the IP address, then we're going to reboot, and then we're going to come back and we're going to change this to reflect the new IP address. That's important to get Virtualmin to work correctly. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the configuration. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to sign out. I'm going to come back here to Putty, and I'm going to do a sudo shutdown -r now. So what I've done is I've told it to shut down and reboot the machine, and I need to enter my password, and then I will lose my connection to Putty. However, if we come back here to our domain controller, we can watch the virtual machine go through its little reboot mode. Okay, still booting. Alright, so let's go ahead and log in at this prompt and see if it's made our changes. So I do ifconfig at the prompt, and now you can see we're indeed at 5.11. So I'm going to log out here. Now I'm going to go ahead and just get out of this screen here, go back to my desktop, and I'm going to close Putty. Now I should not need Putty anymore. So what I want to do is come back in, and let's go back out to the new IP address that we created. Webmin is a wonderful program. I've been using it ever since I have been using Linux, because I do not, as you know, I am not a fan of the command line. They had to name me Pete and Repeat. Alright, so hopefully Webmin will come up here fairly quickly. Okay, and we're getting a couple of warning messages here: update incorrect, refresh. We'll come to that here in a minute. The first thing I want to do is go back out here to networking. I'm sorry, I'm under Virtualmin. I need to go back to Webmin, go under networking, and go to network configuration. And remember this host addresses. I want to go out here and see if it's changed it. If not, I want to change it manually, and it hasn't. So I'm just going to click on it, and I'm going to change that to 5. Let's see. You know, and this is a bug in Google Chrome. See what's happening? Every time I type a number, it comes up over here and thinks I'm typing something in there. So I'm going to use Mozilla for this, just to get us through this. So pardon me while I bring up Mozilla. I don't know what it is with Chrome and that, but it doesn't want to work right. So bear with me. So https://192.168.5.11 port 10,000. Yeah, advanced. We're going to add an exception. Alright, so we'll try this again. And it doesn't do, Chrome doesn't do that every time with Webmin. So I don't know what the issue is. But I suppose the folks over at Webmin and Virtualmin have reported it to Google. Okay, so again, we're going to go back to networking. We're going to go to network configuration, and we're going to go to host addresses. And you can see it's got our old host address, so we want to correct that. So click on it, and we should be able to change it to 5.11. Save it. Return. And then we should be able to apply it. And then come down here to system information. This will bring you to that load screen, etc. And now you can see our system host name is correct. web2.mcs.local at 5.11. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to get all the updates done. And as you can see, there are 128 package updates are available. So the beauty of the reason I didn't select security updates when Ubuntu installed is because I knew Webmin would handle all the updates for me. There are Webmin updates, which is basically it'll go out and it'll look for all the Linux updates that are out there for Ubuntu. So I've just clicked on that. These are all the updates that are out there, and some are security, some are just regular updates, and it tells you over here the side what they are. I always go ahead and do all the updates on all the packages, and then it'll probably reboot. So I'm going to come all the way down here to the bottom. I'm going to do update selected packages because they're all selected. And it's going to build a list, and it's going to ask me, here's the list of all the packets it's going to install or packages, and I'm going to tell it install now. Now this is going to take a bit of time. You may have more updates, you may have less updates. It just depends on what version you install, how old it is, etc. So I'm going to let this run, and we'll come back when the screen asks us to do something different. After these updates are done, the computer's going to want to reboot, and there may still be updates out there. And then once that's done, then we can get on to the configuration of Virtualmin. So the updates have completed. It wants us to reboot, so I'm going to go ahead and reboot the server. We will come back when that is complete. So it looks like it's gotten through. It says all packages are up to date now. Now we've got some warnings here, and we've got recheck and refresh configuration. Now what I'm going to do is show you how I got it to work for me. Your mileage might vary. The problem is that I have installed this on a local internal IP. So the first thing I need to do in order to get this to work is open some ports. Specifically, I'm going to open port 80 and port 443 for now. And I'm going to forward them to this 5.11 address. Now, you also need to have to know what your public IP address is. I purchased a public IP from my internet service provider, so they give me one dedicated IP address and it never changes. Your internet provider may not provide that service, and if that's the case, then you'll need to use dynamic DNS, and that is not. We're not going to go into dynamic DNS. So I'm going to assume you have a hard-coded IP address. So what you want to do is come under here under Virtualmin, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run the configuration wizard on Virtualmin, and that's right down here. It tells you Virtualmin's configuration has not been checked. Click the check button to verify it now. So we're going to recheck and refresh the configuration. Okay. Ignore this one up here for now. Because what it's going to go do is it's going to go down and it's going to check all these items and tell us what we need to change. Okay. The big one here is the default IP address is set to 192.168.5.11, but the detected external address is actually 64.259.29. This is typically the result of being behind a NAT firewall and should be corrected on the module configuration page. So we'll come back to that and take care of that. The other thing is telling you is your postfix can support per domain outgoing IP address currently not configured. I'm going to ignore that. I don't use postfix. This is a big one. Your MySQL is installed and running but does not have any root password. So we should change that immediately. So I'm going to go to the MySQL database module, and I'm going to create a password for it. And I'm going to change it now. Okay, so if we come back over to Virtualmin now, we've changed the password. And Virtualmin is going to want to run the update again. But the next thing I want to do is, you notice we changed it from 5.50 to 5.11. So even though I don't have any virtual servers, I'm going to go out here and get rid of this error. And all I need to do here is just read this screen, the real address. It's going to update 5.50 to 5.11. And I'm just going to go ahead and click on change now. And it's going to come back and say there are no virtual servers. But you will see once I return and go to Virtualmin, it gets rid of that error message we were receiving. Bingo. Okay. So the next thing you want to do is open port 80 and port 443, and you want to forward those to your 5.11 or whatever IP address it is that you have. The other thing I want to show you is under system settings under Virtualmin, and right down here, this item right here, Virtualmin configuration. Now, this is very important. You can change these settings here and really screw things up. But the big one that you need to do is right here for the default IP addresses for DNS records. You need to change that to automatically detect external address, and there's a reason for that, because when you're using NAT, NAT needs to know what the external IP address is, or Virtualmin needs to know what the external IP address is in order to create DNS records correctly. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to click on save. Okay, and now I'm going to recheck. Anytime you make a change like that, you need to recheck and refresh your configuration. Now this is where things can get a little bit confusing, because you've got your private internal IP, and then you got your public external IP. And you can see the system is ready to use by Virtualmin. But let's go out and we're going to create a virtual server, and I'm going to show you what's going to happen when we do that. So we just go out here and we create a virtual server now. And let's just use a domain that I have, htitx.com. You're going to give it an administrative password. And then I go under Enable Features, and I take off Virus Filtering. I take off Accept Mail. I take off Spam Filtering. And the rest I leave them all and on, and the rest I leave alone. So now we go out here and create server. Let it run. And when you're done, you should have a virtual server. And I do. You can see right up here my virtual server is htitx.com. Now, that change that we made in the configuration is the reason we see this now. So it knows that the website is on the server at 5.11, but it knows you have to access it by the external IP address. So that's good. That's a good sign. That means it's good. Now, the other thing I want to do is come in here to server configuration and go into DNS records. And I want to talk about this for a minute. And you can see now it's set up all the www, FTP, mlocalhost, webmail, admin, all the local DNS settings. And you're going to see this error up here. I don't want you to be concerned about this error. Normally what you would do is you would create under Webmin your own name servers. And then what would happen is that you would go out to your DNS registry and point that domain to these DNS servers instead of for example, I use Hover to host my domains. So I use Hover's domain servers. But if I were a web hosting company, I would create my own internal name servers like NS1, NS2, and then I would point my DNS or my registration to my name servers. But that's an extra step I don't really feel I need, because I don't do a whole lot of web hosting, and it's just as easy for me to go in and to go into my hover.com account, use their name servers, and just change all of these settings under Hover. The other thing that allows me to do under Hover, which I could do here too, is to have a separate mail server and a separate IP address, etc. So don't be too concerned if you find this error. All that means is you haven't set up an internal name server of your own in order to use it. So the next thing I want to do is I want to have phpMyAdmin installed so I can, modify my database or whatever I need to do. So if you come over here to install scripts, you will see that you have some scripts that you can install. Granted, it's limited, but the first one I want to do is phpMyAdmin, and so I select that, and then I'm going to click on Show Install Options, and then I'm going to read this very carefully. So it's going to install it under this database. And this is very important. Install subdirectory under public HTML. If I did it at the top level, this would be my default website. So I don't want to do that. I want to install it in a subdirectory, which is why it listed as phpMyAdmin. And I only need English language, so I'm not going to install all languages. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Install Now. Now, you can also do this by just, FTPing into your server and then uploading a file to it and setting it up like this, but I like to use the install script just to make things a little bit easier. And this won't take long to run. Okay, so if we come back up here to edit virtual server, let's go to edit users, because what we need to do is be able to FTP into that server. So I could use this account. So the account I would use would be htitx. I would go to htitx.com. FTP into it because I already have an account set up. But if you wanted to create additional users for FTP, you do that right here. Don't do it. Don't do a batch create users. Add a website FTP user, access user. This is where you would add those there. All right. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to do an install script, and I want to install WordPress. So I'm going to go up here to Available Scripts, and I'm going to install WordPress. Now this time I'm going to install WordPress at the top level, because when my users come to my website, I just want them to go to my WordPress site. So I'm going to go ahead and install now. Alright, now it tells me it's done, and I can find it right here to complete the install. So what I need to do now is I need to go out and make some changes to my firewall, mainly open that port so it forwards to 5.11. So I'll do that and I'll come right back. Alright, so I've made the changes to my DNS. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this link. Yes, I'm going to copy this link location. And then I'm going to open a new tab, paste it, and we're going to see if it works. And it did. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on with the WordPress install. Okay, so I just chose a password of password 2017 with a couple of $signs in there. And I'm going to go ahead and install WordPress. I'm not going to save that password. It says it's done. Now I should be able to log in. And choose login and don't save. And there we are. And there's our WordPress site. Now let's see if we can go into our PHP-MyAdmin page. And there's the PHP-MyAdmin page. So as you can see, it's a fairly trivial process to install Webmin, install Virtualmin, and to get your domain set up. Now, you could use cPanel. You can get cPanel, and you can do the same thing I'm doing with Webmin and Virtualmin by using cPanel, and it would cost you about $20 a month to run cPanel. cPanel gives you a lot more features, a lot easier to do, get into what you need to do. But for advanced web hosting, I'm just using basic web hosting here. I'm not doing anything special. So this works for most of my clients and for myself. So that's all, folks. We now have a fully functioning web server. I can put any number of virtual domains on there I wanted to. I could test them. I could run them. In fact, this is where I'm going to be hosting my domain from now on. My mcstx.net domain is going to be hosted on my own internal servers. Now, this is not for the faint of heart. It's also not for... it's just for a lab environment for you guys. That's why I did this video. There are certain things you need to be aware of if you do this in a production setting. You're going to need to have a firewall up. You're going to need to do packet inspection, that kind of thing, way advanced for what we're doing. But for the majority of users, this is basically you're going to need to open 2 ports, maybe 3 if you're using an FTP server. Or if you're using SSH, so that people can get in and out of the server and do what they need to do. But that's a more advanced topic if you're in the commercial industry. But for a basic home user, it's a great way to set up a web server, get your feet wet, learn how it works. Not only my programmers that I use, I also teach them the back end so that they know what's going on in the back end and how their changes affect the back end. Because there's the front end where all the programming is done and the beautiful user interface, and then there's the back end. And I always find that when my programmers know how the back end works, it makes them more effective programmers. They know what I'm having to face on the back end compared to what they have to do on the front end. So there you go. Hope you found the video entertaining and informative. As always, give us a thumbs up down below if you liked it. Give us a donation on PayPal or Patreon if you're so inclined. And we will see you next time and on the other side.